Okay, good morning. I'm Dan Garodnick, Chair of the City Planning Commission and Director of the Department of City Planning. Welcome to today's public meeting of April 26th. We will have a few votes today, including for a new supermarket at 180 East 25th Street, East Harlem, Manhattan. This new store would be part of the Department of City Planning's Fresh program, which brings healthy food options to underserved communities throughout New York City. We will also vote on authorizations for in-ground swimming pools at 55 Arbor Court and 93 Cromwell Circle, as well as a certification for the development of 6 two-family homes at 57 Elder Avenue and 125 South Gough Avenue, all on Staten Island. Moving on to public hearings, and I will note we're going to do the voting just a smidge later in the agenda because we have a couple of commissioners who are running late today. So we're just going to change the order of today's meeting just a smidge. Moving to public hearings, New Yorkers are welcome to testify on a proposed acquisition of new office space for Manhattan Community Board 4 at 630 9th Avenue near the Theater District. This ADA accessible space will include offices for staff and a conference room for hybrid public meetings. We'll also hold a hearing today on a 100% affordable, resilient building with over 100 homes, around 20 of them supportive, located at 2932 Beach Channel Drive in Bayswater, Queens. Tenants would have access to open space via Bayswater Park and transit via the A train. Also in Queens, we will hear about a proposal on 43rd Avenue between 222nd and 223rd Streets in Bayside to make an existing retaining wall legal. So, with that, by way of introduction, Sarah, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held remotely through the NYC Engage portal and in person in the CPC Hearing Room, 120 Broadway, Lower Concourse. Today is Wednesday, April 26, 2023. I will now call the roll. Chair Garodnick.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Present.
Commissioner Bozard.
Here.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Crowell. Absent. Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Gold.
Here.
Commissioner Goodridge. Commissioner Kermani. Here. Commissioner Medin.
Here.
Commissioner Osorio.
Here.
And Commissioner Ramprashad, I believe we have on Zoom.
Yes, here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the special public meeting of Monday, April 24th, 2023.
Great. On the minutes, I make a motion to approve the minutes of Monday, April 24th. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Chairman seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved.
Scheduling. Calendar numbers 1 through 8. We have resolutions for adoption scheduling Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 for a public hearing to be held in person in the CPC Hearing Room, 120 Broadway, and remotely through the NYC Engage portal.
Thank you. On the resolutions, I make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Dweck with second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, Commissioner Ramprashad. We got you. Resolutions are adopted.
The next part of the calendar is the report section, which we will move to after the public hearing items. So the next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 9.
Great. Thank you very much. We're going to ask those who are testifying to limit remarks to 3 minutes. Let us move to the very first item on the agenda today.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 15, 630 9th Avenue, CB4 office space, CD4. N230111PXM public hearing and the matter of an application for a notice of intent to acquire office space concerning 630 9th Avenue, Manhattan Community Board 4 office space.
Excellent. Thank you. So for this item, calendar number 15 at 630 9th Avenue, we have an applicant, which is the New York City DCAS, represented here by Carrie Lowe, supported by Thomas Morandi, Jesse Bodine, and Jeffrey Lefrancois. And they're on Zoom, so we're going to pull them up. And as soon as you are ready, you can go ahead and make your presentation. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse Bodine. I'm the district manager for Manhattan Community Board 4. Greetings, Chair and Commissioners. I will just note, yes, we are joined by our chair of the board, Jeffrey LaFrancois, here for support and answer any questions you might have for him. But we are here to discuss and present on the proposed office space relocation for our district office to 630 9th Avenue. Next slide. So just an overview. I'm sure you all know what we do, but community boards play an important advisory role that include but not limited to land use planning and zoning matters, city budget, city services, and quality of life issues impacting the community District 4 area, which is West 59th Street to West 14th Street, 6th and 7th Avenues to the river. Those are the neighborhoods of Chelsea, Clinton, Hell's Kitchen, and Hudson Yards. Our district office hours are typically Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Next slide. So a little history for us. In 2020, in the heart of the pandemic, we were ejected from our location at 330 West 42nd Street due to a sublease not being renewed. We found temporary office space at 424 West 33rd Street under a license agreement. That license agreement is expiring this year, and the landlord has let us know that they are wanting to reacquire this space that we are in now. So we are, been looking for a long-term solution for quite a while, even before 2020. The long-term office space has to be fully accessible and has to be adequate for our staff and for our board members, as well as the community that it serves. Next slide. The proposed location is 630 9th Avenue, also known as the Film Center building. It's a 13-story office building. It's ADA accessible. It has an attended lobby, and the added bonus of the lobby being designated as a New York City interior landmark. It is very close to a number of forms of public transportation, subway, bus lines, and bike lanes. Next slide. The actual space itself is approximately 1,900 square feet. It includes an open layout plus 2 private offices for staff, a copy station, pantry, and then a waiting area for guests, and then a conference room. I would like to just highlight the conference room is the kind of the real get here for us. We have, for a long time, I've been looking for a space that we're able to hold meetings in, regular office hour meetings in, but also be able to hold evening committee meetings in. Next slide. This is a plan of the entire floor, so you can see our location on the floor. It's right by the elevators and right by the bathrooms, which is always nice. Next slide. And then this is the actual proposed layout of our office space. Again, I would like just to highlight.
Mr. Bodine, you're at time, so I'm just going to ask you to just quickly show us your final slides here and wrap up, because we'd like to just see.
Yep, sure. This is the final slide. So the light blue rectangle there is the conference room there, and that's just the kind of the key thing there that you can clearly see. We will be able to have a few dozen people there to be able to hold committee meetings in when we go into a hybrid fashion. And that is it. I'm here happy to answer any questions.
Great, terrific. Well, thank you. It seems to me that the location is central to the operations of the board, and the addition of the conference room will certainly be a big assist, I would think. So thank you for that. Let me see if there are questions from commissioners. Great. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your being with us and for all of the important work that you do every day on behalf of Community Board 4 and the city. And let me see if there are any members of the public wishing to testify on this item. I see none. So we will close the hearing on calendar 15, 630 9th Avenue, the office space for Manhattan Community Board 4, and move on to the next item on the agenda today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please, calendar numbers 16 and 17, Ocean Crest rezoning. CD 14, calendar number 16, C230041ZMQ. Calendar number 17, N230042ZRQ. Public hearing and the matter of applications for a zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning Ocean Crest rezoning.
Great. So we have today, on behalf of the applicant, I see Carrie Harris at the podium, but we also have Aaron Werner, Harrison Haygood, Jesse Battis, Diane Lubes, and Alan Mogadam. So Ms. Harris, whenever you are ready, welcome.
Nice to see you this morning. It's been quite some time. Could you move to the next slide, please? The applicant is the Community Builders, Inc., and they are represented here by me, of course, at Goldman Harris 2, our WMBE. And Jesse is the Regional Vice President of Development, Urban Architectural Initiatives, is Alan Mogadon, and AKRF's Aaron Warner's on the Zoom. Next page, please. It's important to know that Community Builders is one of the leading developers of not just affordable housing, but community development. And that's a really wonderful aspect of this developer. They focus not only on building housing, but on building communities and investing in the neighborhood in ways that support the housing and the whole community. They have 2 other projects in New York City, one at Beach 21st Street and one in Park Haven in the Bronx. Next. We have had ongoing community outreach, received written support from the organizations listed, and some 11 residents. And as you know, Community Board 14 voted it down, but we were proud to receive 2 favorable votes, along with 2 abstentions. And Queensborough President gave us a conditional favorable vote. Next slide, please. The proposed actions have been identified. And as you see on the rezoning map, we're rezoning this portion of a block from an R41 to R6A. Next slide. And this is the portion of the block we're rezoning. It includes 2 full tax lots and a very sliver of a 3rd tax lot. And the zoning change from R41 to R6A with mandatory inclusionary housing will change the FAR from 0.75 to 3.6 for residential. The proposed building is a 90,985 square foot residential building with ground floor community facilities, 106 dwelling units, including one for the super, 100% affordable. This is really important, especially with what appears deaths of 421A, to have a affordable housing developer doing 100% affordable housing units. This is how right now we can get more affordable housing in New York. Required parking is 27 spaces. The community was really aching for more parking. There are 25 spaces available in the other building on the zoning lot, and they have offered to our building to let our residents use it. The zoning lot will not be built full with the 2 buildings on it. 3.52 FAR will be on the zoning lot instead of 3.6. Go ahead. I know you're interested in the land use rationale for this project, and I will go through, there are about 9 points here, but I will point out the rationale as we go through the slides. So next slide, please. The project is across the street from Bayswater Park. It's a 40-acre park. The project is on a wide street and at a large intersection. This is an ideal place for increasing bulk. It's diagonally across from an existing R6A zoning district, and the 2 together would form a bridge between the R4A to the north and an R72 equivalents to the south. There are also several other tall buildings in that location, in that area, 7 stories, 20 stories, 8 stories. So having our 8-story building is not completely out of context. It's not plunking a huge building down in the middle of family houses. It's close to transit. It is, in that sense, transit-oriented development, even though it is not considered a transit zone. There's subway train, buses, and not too far, Long Island Railroad. The photographs of the site, of the block, show that there are already 2 large buildings on the block that will be adjacent to the proposed development. They are both non-compliant. The reason they are non-compliant is that the one on the left is a pre-61 building, and it is now greater than R41. And the buildings on the right, no, I'm sorry, I flipped that. The buildings on the right are pre-61. The building on the left was built starting in 2005, again before a downzoning from R6 to R41. You can see on the left that we are using, this is a development site on the left, and it's a very underutilized parking lot that's part of the whole zoning lot. And so by building a building in this place, we're taking underutilized property and putting it to good purpose. You can see across the street to the right is the Bayswater Park on the wide street. So these are, again, good reasons to have an upzoning here so we can actually build something. The building has an ambitious WMBE and local hiring goals, aiming at more than the 30% required for WMBE, OSHA training, and as an additional amenities to the people in the building and next door, they're providing discount broadband internet, which we know is so important now, and that these communities are underserved. And there will be a proposed daycare or other community facility on the ground floor. From an affordability viewpoint, this is meeting city goals. Another good reason. All of these are good reasons supporting land use rationales for the project. It's 100% affordable, relying on ELA, 50% local preference in leasing, and you can see here what the range of incomes will be met in the building, and that they also mirror the range of incomes in the neighborhoods north and south. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Mogadon to describe the building.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone. I'll try to be fast with this. This is just an illustrative rendering of the building from ground level from Bayswater Park, which shows the various setbacks, terracing, and high-quality materials we're using to produce an elegant yet understated building for the neighborhood. The next slide, please. This is an overview of Bayswater Park, looking at the proposed building again. First and foremost, to address the flood resiliency issues, we have raised the building on the first floor by over 3 feet above the design flood elevation and over 5 feet above the established floodplain, which takes into account the expected sea level rise to the year 2080. The building's main entry, you can see, is at the corner and is accessed nicely with a landscape stair and an integrated ramp. To the right is the community facility space directly accessed from 32nd Street. The parking entry on the left is accessing the at-grade parking, which leads to the additional parking that Carrie talked about in the existing building. The at-grade parking and eliminating the cellar furthers the resiliency goals of the building by minimizing the impervious surfaces that could exacerbate flooding, and will also minimize the water going into the city's sewers. We'll see in a future slides, but at this point, I just want to point out that the green spaces that we have on the setback roofs are adjacent to the building's community spaces and provide views to Bayswater Park for the tenants. Next slide, please. Here are some of the sustainability and resiliency features that I discussed. This will provide a tight and efficient envelope above and beyond enterprise green community and further technologies, and will maintain a resilient building for the tenants and the neighbors at large. Next slide, please. Here you can see on the site plan the proposed building in blue and green, and the existing building in gray that's going to be on our zoning lot, and the various setbacks that we have adjacent to the R4 district building that is to the right of the proposed building. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is the ground floor plan showing the relationship of the proposed parking and the existing parking, which is marked and provides access between the two spaces for use by both tenants. And then if we go to the last slide, this is what I mentioned earlier on the 7th floor terrace, where we have the laundry room, community room, and the exercise room adjacent to the terraces of the building, and and the tenants could take advantage of, and also gives them a view of Bayswater Park and Jamaica Bay beyond. And 30 seconds left.
Any questions?
We do. Thank you very much. Before I go to Vice Chair Knuckles, let me just ask one. Ms. Harris, as you pointed out, this area, this site was downzoned a number of years ago to an R41. Now, I have been to this site, and as you pointed out in your slides, there are existing buildings which were put out of compliance as a result of that change. So the character would not materially change here at this density. But if you can just make a case for a moment about why it is good and appropriate to do an R6A here after an R4A downzoning within, I don't know, whatever it was, 20 years. If you could just make a case for R6A here, that would be useful.
Well, I'd like to reiterate the case for it is that I think, with all due respect to your predecessors, I think that they painted with too broad a brush at that location, at that corner, knowing that there were already two buildings erected with a big open parking lot. And I don't know what the utilization was of the parking lot at the time, but it would have made more sense to end the R41 on the north side of Ocean Crest instead of extending it here. And particularly because we had there's the R6 across R6A across the street. And so I think that this makes a better transition from a zoning viewpoint to have the R4A to the north and then R6A as a bow tie, and then extending to the south where you'll see where the C43A and C44 are either R6A equivalents or R7. So I think it's a better transition. Maybe the prior rezoning was a little too hard a line without a thought of a transition location.
Thank you. Vice Chair Knuckles?
Thank you, Chair. How many additional units, would be produced by the upzoning from R4 to R6?
Yes, 106 units. There's no possibility of an increase in floor area on the zoning lot, except that I should say 105. One is the supers. The 606th unit is the supers unit. So 105 units for affordability and one for the super.
And it would be the same under R4?
Under R4, there's no new units at all. Zero. It's overbuilt.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Gold?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Just two quick questions. The first is, obviously, one of the objections coming from the community board was height in context of the neighborhood. Can you speak a little bit more to that, to how we're thinking about that?
Yes, I'd like to, and Alan can go into it in greater detail. It's not uncommon for there to be taller buildings on wide streets, and certainly across from a park where the impact is minimal on adjacent properties. You can see even in this slide to the right, in a kind of tan color, is the other existing building in the rezoning area. That one's not in the zoning lot, but it's in the rezoning area. And so there's already a taller building, taller than the 1- and 2-family homes on the corner there. And so the way it's been designed, I'm giving props.
Sorry, how tall is that building, the one that you're pointing to?
It's a
Five-story with a oversized first floor.
Got it.
And even though this is 8 stories, it's only a 20-foot difference between the height of the two buildings. And this forms a kind of stepping, especially with the great, wonderful setbacks that Alan's included. And so it fits into the context of of the rezoning area of that block fronting on Bayswater. I know it's taller than the 1- and 2-family homes on Ocean Crest, but again, the design of it has been thoughtful in making setbacks so it wouldn't be overpowering to the neighbors.
Got it. Perfect. And then one other question. What precautions are we taking? It looks like some for flooding. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't steal your question. But being in the flood zone, presumably there are some precautions that you put in place.
Absolutely, I'll let Alan speak to that.
Sure. We're as I said, we're 3 feet above the New York City Building Code required and 5 feet above the flood neighborhood's floodplain. This is in lines with the New York City resiliency guidelines, and furthermore, we're trying to make eliminate impervious surfaces. We don't have a cellar that blocks the water flow on the cellar. We will try to keep the first floor as dry flood proof as we possibly can, though we're not required to. Emergency generator, potential battery backup for the solar system. So all of these measures are going in to make a building that's viable. And if I could add to the building in case of a flood emergency, because then we have a building that has a generator and could serve the building in case of something like Sandy happens.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
There's another feature that was not highlighted before, which I include in flood resiliency. They have solar panels on the roof without having to use the full benefit of what City of Yes is proposing. They're pretty much flat on the roof. The building is shorter than it could be in this district, and so wouldn't need the City of Yes cushion that's afforded. But by having photovoltaic panels, There's also an opportunity for power, I suppose, even if there's an outage elsewhere that would affect this property.
And the generator.
And there's the generator.
Thank you very much. We have Commissioners Osorio, Rampersad, Bozarg, and Benjamin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you for addressing, and Commissioner Gold, thank you for raising the topic on flooding. I wanted to start there, and I wanted to ask if you can respond a little bit to the concerns that the community board had in terms of potential evacuation. So in addition to complying with the building code, and I think beginning to understand a little bit what are going to be the implications with sea level rise, which go beyond the current requirements. But as you mentioned, you're starting to do that. I was wondering, how are you responding to the community's concerns in terms of the need to evacuate?
My understanding is that the city itself is coming up with an evacuation plan for the whole area, and this building, as all the others, would be incorporated in that plan. I don't know if there's a specific evacuation plan for the building. I'll let the developer, Jesse, come up and speak to that.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity again. So there is an existing evacuation plan, which is in the process of always being reviewed and updated. My understanding was there were 2 grants provided for 2 different emergency preparedness plans already for the neighborhood. Our organization is completely supportive, and in any way that we can help contribute to thoughts about evacuation routes and ways that our building can contribute to that, we're open to it. One area that we do think has benefited here versus some other places in Rockaway is that we are towards the east side of the peninsula, which does give it closer proximity to some of the flood evacuation routes than some of the other areas in Rockaway.
But specifically, I mean, I think that the concern that they have is that the level of density that you're proposing exceeds that capacity. So what is your response to their specific question? It's not whether they can evacuate or not, it's that the amount of density exceeds that capacity.
I understand the question, and what I do think is that the nature of the peninsula is that there are only so many routes in and out of the peninsula, and that's certainly understood and heard. And there's been new developments built in the peninsula that have exacerbated those concerns with the community. In terms of constructing new streets, things that we advocate as an organization are ways that we can potentially raise the road beds, which we've spoken to RISE about, ways that we can contribute to funding to create a more resilient location. I think in the event of an emergency right now, if more roadways were built, there's difficulty in terms of getting in and getting out. We do think that the density is appropriate, especially consistent with all of the density that's been constructed over the course of the last 20 years. But I think that's, to the extent that there are additional plans and ways that we can contribute to that, that's something we're very open to.
Fair enough. So just to make sure I understand, you're saying that the proposal is consistent, but depends on some of these initiatives that the city is discussing in terms of improving the infrastructure for evacuation.
I think the proposal is consistent as it stands, but I think we are completely supportive of finding additional ways to be more prepared for the event of a flood or an emergency.
Okay, understood. So it's fair to say that you validate the concern. You're willing to engage in that.
Absolutely. Not to make it too personal, my family's from Rockaway, and I live in Long Beach. So, very familiar with what happened during Sandy. We dealt with this. We shared this concern. Again, we want to be part of the solution. That's part of what our organization does as a nonprofit. We make, pretty large investments in communities where we decide to build beyond just the housing. And this is a piece that we think we'd love to be a part of the solution for.
Thank you. I have another quick follow-up question. One is, you don't have to answer it now, but I'm very excited about hearing more about the plan for solar. And I'm wondering if you can submit maybe in writing some of the plans of how you're thinking to lay that out. My question is really about the affordability levels to non-Hispanic, Black, and Latino families, where the median household income is considerably lower than the general MHI, dropping up to 47.2 or 40.8. So I'm wondering, how are we making sure that those families are going to be able to achieve or reach those thresholds?
Sure. A great question. And again, our organization is an affordable housing developer, right? So we totally support affordability at the deepest levels as we can build them. In thinking through how we came up with this income tier and mix, we thought through the census tract the location was in, as well as the census tracts around it, to create not dissimilar to the bow tie effect for the rezoning, something that would be accessible to people throughout the neighborhoods that it surrounded. There was a comment that came from the borough president's office, as it means that we could potentially increase 30% affordable units. That's something we're certainly supportive of, and we're going to work through in our underwriting to figure out ways we can maximize that. In terms of making sure we're reaching minority organizations and individuals, individuals and residents, we're subject to an affordable housing, an affordable fair housing marketing plan. That includes both outreach through a structured process, making sure that we're writing our documents in course of different languages, making sure that it's getting out to different folks in the community, working with housing navigators to navigate Housing Connect system to get into the lottery system in advance. And then, of course, that 50% local preference, which will target those minorities and the percentage in the neighborhood. So the good thing about that marketing plan is that it does provide an assessment opportunity where when we're done, we look to make sure that we achieved a good mix in terms of our outreach. So we feel comfortable about moving forward on that, and that's something we will continue to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ramprashad?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Also, Commissioner Rosario asked a lot of the questions I was going to ask, and I was really curious of your response to the community board's concerns, evacuation height, which you've answered. One of the questions I have is in borough president's conditions, he had suggested or said that provide a letter of commitment addressing the comments you made during the BP's hearing. Have you guys done that or provided that? If not, when will you do it? And also, I know you were talking about, you're going to talk to underwriting about seeing if you can increase to the 30% AMI. When will you be able to have that information provided, I guess, before we vote on this item?
We have submitted the letter of commitment to the borough president's office last week. Again, it was, the underwriting has to be able to work to produce more 30% units, and the client is working on that right now. I don't know his timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
We have a working model we can certainly share now, but we feel more comfortable waiting until it's 100% been vetted with HPD as we move forward that process. But to the extent that you'd like to see how this could work, theoretically, that's something we're available to share by the end of the week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramprashad. Commissioner Bozarg?
Yes, I was also wondering about the evacuation plans, and I just wanted to push on that a little bit more. My understanding is in a management plan, you could still be building in kind of an evacuation plan for the building itself, especially given you're going to have vulnerable populations. So could you talk a little bit about the community builder's experience with that, or have you picked a building manager yet? I don't know if TCB does its own management, but if you've considered, especially since you're housing some vulnerable populations, having an evacuation plan for the building residents, not just where it sits within the context of the neighborhood and the larger kind of city's evacuation planning.
Yeah, it's a great comment, and a good point in that, yes, we can control for what we can control for within our building with an evacuation plan that's specific to residents in the building. That includes access to areas of refuge within the building in the event of an emergency. Certainly, we're exploring at the suggestion of the community board means to provide some access to electric within the units so that the emergency generator doesn't just power emergency systems, but also provides one outlet for folks in the event that they can charge a phone, access, if they're stuck in their building and there's a flood and they can't get out, ways to make sure people can shelter in place until the situation has resolved. But it is something that we can, on a building by building basis, something we would definitely, as a manager, and TCB will be the manager for this property, something we can put together for building specific prem.
Yeah, because I think even features like how communication will reach residents so that they know what's happening through the city. I know that can be an issue at times for especially supportive populations.
And so we actually use a system as a manager that involves a series of text alerts, a series of phone alerts, as well as obviously the old handwritten letter under the door to advise people of serious potential flooding events, potential emergencies, situations that might be dangerous in the neighborhood outside of just flooding or emergencies. And that's something we would have available for this building as well.
Great. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Benjamin?
Hi, I have two somewhat contradictory questions, but the first is, what are the size of the kind of each grouping of apartments, the square footage?
They're consistent with HPD guidelines. And plus, I know TCB, we did a building that they're always looking at an interior design, and so the living rooms are a little bit wider than HPD requirement guidelines. Specifically, I could tell you, the 2 bedrooms are around 675 square feet. The 1 bedrooms are around 550. The 3 bedrooms are around 950. And the studios, if I could find it here. And the studios, we're looking at somewhere around 400, which is about 50 square feet more than what, HPD requires.
Okay. Because my second question somewhat relates to that, which is, this is a rezoning. So we're approving a rezoning, not this project. So what could be built? Did you analyze a reasonable alternative plan if a market rate developer, for whatever reasons, your financing fell through or the market crashed or L money wasn't available and 421 wasn't there, and if all the list of horribles happened and you had to sell this site, what could be built? What's the maximum density that this rezoning could produce?
We haven't maximized this unit, but when we were working with the city planning with your city planning staff, what we did specifically is put the zoning boundary lot. So to the left of the building over here, you can see that there's a 3-story or 2-story plus a raised cellar house, which is the first house that starts that row. What we did is we put the zoning boundary, so we were required to have an 8-foot side yard. Then we have a limit of 40 feet within 25 feet of that side yard line. So with that said, yes, you're right. Somebody could take over the building after the rezoning, build something, but we put those controls in there with your staff to be able to control that as far as the bulk of the building goes.
Right, but if the apartment distribution were to change, let's say if a private developer took over and did the typical 40% studios, 40% ones, and 20% greater than 1 bedrooms, the density would be different.
It would be less. There would be a less dense project if it were built by a market rate developer. The units would be larger. There would be fewer of them. So I can't tell you, we could probably do the math, and we're happy to send that in to you, about what would be, based on whatever the density factor is for this district, what could be built there if the maximum that could be built there if a market rate developer were proceeding. We haven't done that calculation, but we're happy to provide it.
Okay, I would like that just so I know what the alternatives are once this is approved, that I've kind of done that that I've asked you to do my due diligence for me.
Be happy to do that,
Thank
Commissioner.
you. Thanks, Carolyn.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. I have a follow-up from Commissioner Osorio and Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Chair. I was very excited with your initial response about a potential sheltering in place strategy where the solar panels would be connected to storage, and ostensibly you can have kind of like a renewable source of power ready to go. And I appreciated your comment about the City of Yes, but then in response to Commissioner Bozark, you brought in emergency generators, and so I was then confused because in my mind that's diesel, and so can you explain a little bit which one, or if you're doing both, then why are you doing both?
No, it's a great question. So right now we have a dual fuel generator plan for the building. So it has natural gas connections, but in the event of what we saw at Sandy, where the gas lines get cut, backup diesel if we needed it. That's in the plan now. We've also been exploring potential battery backup. The question is, can we use that battery backup to power the building for the needs that we'll need for the emergency situations? Not something that we've completely vetted yet, but it is something we're reviewing. So right now in plan, there's a dual fuel generator. In the event that we could create some capacity on the battery system to use that to meet all of our emergency needs, that is available for us to look at as well.
It's problematic because, right now we really need to make every single effort to decarbonize. And, to say that, you have a sheltering in place strategy ready to go, but that may be entirely renewable, may not, it starts to create additional concerns in terms of the cost of being able to, protect the health and safety of the population that you're proposing, the density that you're proposing, which begins to, resonate with issues about air quality and other things if you start sort of like signaling that this may be necessarily fossil fuel dependent.
So let me just clarify. Right now in the plan, there is a dual fuel generator, and that was to meet specifically the needs related to emergency conditions, specifically for what we just talked about in terms of sheltering in place and means to allow people to live there in a comfortable way in the event that they are stuck in the building. That said, we're really excited about all the money that's coming in from the federal government right now towards renewable sources. So what I like to say is we shake every tree and look for every opportunity where we can provide either a redundancy to that generator where we're not looking at it unless it's an extreme measure of last resort, or B, the ability that a battery system could take that over entirely and obviate the system.
I commend you for your rationale, and I encourage you to really sort of shoot for the latter, because it's urgent, and also you need to justify the level of density in an area that you've already identified could potentially need evacuation, and you're relying on potential infrastructure investments on behalf of the city.
Absolutely. Totally reasonable comment. And, just we'll highlight that our organization's been at the forefront of decarbonization for a long time. We've been working with HUD on a challenge to decarbonize and reduce emissions from our buildings since their initial challenge, I think about a decade ago. So this is something we care a lot about, and we're doing it across our portfolio and everything we own here in New York and New Jersey and really across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. You allot 17 supportive housing units for formerly homeless families out of the 106. Is that enough to warrant on-site support services? And if so, what kind of services would they be?
Sure. So what we've done in using the ELA term sheet is there is a mandatory set aside for the formerly homeless families, and that's what we've built into the system. Mm-hmm. What we generally do is we seek financing for supportive services either through 1515 or through the ESHI program at the state level to provide real case management rather than what the city views as light touch social services for folks coming out of shelter systems. My personal opinion is if you're coming out of a shelter system, light touch really isn't a possibility. You need to provide something that's really supportive and wraparound to help people live to their fullest, which again, as a mission-based organization, is something that we fully support. Right now, our building at Beach 21st Street, which is a little less than a mile from this site, currently has on-site supportive services provided through the 1515 program and a partner organization at CAMBA. We would look at potentially doing a similar arrangement here for that set aside of units and potentially even expanding it if that was something that the community felt was helpful through another grant opportunity, either 1515 or ESHI. As to providing that provision at the site, it would probably be within a unit. To the event that family needed it, they could come and do direct to the unit services, or it would be handled at our central operation up the street.
And where is that in proximity to the site?
It is Beach 21st Street. It's one stop off the A train, right off the Mott Avenue train station.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Okay, seeing no other questions from the Commission, I'm just going to take a final look to see if there are members of the public who wish to testify on this item. Going once, going twice, seeing none. Thank you all very much for being here and for advancing this proposal. We will close the hearing on calendars 16 and 17, the Ocean Crest rezoning, and we will open the hearing on our next item. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sarah, what's next?
Borough of Queens, 43rd Avenue demapping, CD11 C210323 MMQ. Public hearing in the matter of an application for a city map amendment concerning 43rd Avenue demapping.
Great. Thank you very much. On this item, we have the applicant represented by Frank St. Jacques of Ackerman LLP, who will present for 3 minutes. So whenever you are settled and ready, you can go ahead and begin.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Gorodnick and Commissioners. I'm Frank St. Jacques with Ackerman. We represent the applicant in this application for a city map amendment regarding a 1,559 square foot portion of the south side of 43rd Avenue between 222nd Street to the west and 223rd Street to the east. The applicant is the owner of 22208 43rd Avenue, which is located on the corner of 43rd Avenue and 222nd Street. This property and the adjacent property to the east have retaining walls that encroach onto the south side of 43rd Avenue by approximately 8 feet for the full length of 43rd Avenue between 222nd and 223rd Streets. Ultimately, the applicant is seeking to obtain a certificate of occupancy for his home, which requires him to resolve the issue with this encroachment. Next slide, please. The affected portion of the south side of 43rd Avenue is shown on the zoning and land use map. The western side of the block is zoned R3X and the eastern side is zoned R32. Next slide, please. This survey shows the affected 1,559 square foot portion of 43rd Avenue, highlighted in yellow in the context of the surrounding area. Along this portion of 43rd Avenue, the sidewalk width ranges from 4 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 2 inches, and the planting area is 12 feet 7 inches at its widest point near the intersection of 43rd Avenue and 222nd Street. That's highlighted in green. The applicant's property abuts the western half of the proposed demapping area. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view with the area proposed to be demapped highlighted in yellow. The applicant purchased the property in 1992. According to the applicant, he had the current retaining wall built starting in around 2006 to replace an existing retaining wall. At the time, he was not aware of the encroachment onto the city street. A few years after, in 2010, portions of the wall were damaged in a storm and DOB issued violations as a result. The applicant had repairs made to the wall, but was unable to certify correction of the violations to the Department of Buildings. According to the applicant, this is when he learned of the encroachment issue. We provided details of those violations to staff. Next slide, please. This photo on the left shows the applicant's property and the encroaching retaining wall. And just in the interest of time, if we could move forward to the next slide. This alteration map shows the proposed change to the city map that was prepared based on DOT's recommendation regarding the dimensions and review by the Topographical Bureau of the Office of the Queensborough President. Next slide, please. Here's the details showing the enlarged dimensions of approximately 8 feet, running the full 195-foot length of 43rd Avenue, based on a recommendation from DOT. Next slide, please. So finally, as a condition of ultimately a mapping agreement with the city, if this demapping is approved, DOT is requiring the applicant to improve the existing curb condition, essentially removing the jog that's illustrated with the blue line so that the curb follows a straight line, which is shown with the red dotted line. The new proposed line is shown in yellow and the line below. I know that was quick. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, let me kick it off, and then I know that there will be questions from the commission. Just to understand a little bit more about the history of the site and of the applicant's ownership and reconstruction of the wall. As I understand it, the wall was built in 1958 originally. The applicant purchased the property in 1992. The wall was there. So far, correct?
Correct.
And then decided to rebuild the wall in 2006. Didn't realize it was encroaching on city property, did it? Correct so far?
Correct so far, based on our...
Was there... Go ahead, finish your thought, sorry.
Oh, sorry, based on our research and discussion with the applicant, yes, that's correct.
And was there any difference at all in the location of where the 1958 wall was located and the 2006 wall was located?
That I have not been able to confirm either with a survey or with research that we've done through tax map photos with the Department of Buildings, with sort of any available public records, either physical or digital. I've not been able to confirm the comparison of the original wall and the 2006 wall. So I'm afraid I don't have that question.
So it's possible that the owner here increased the encroachment on the public street or decreased it. We don't actually know, or kept it exactly the same. We don't know one way or the other. It seems like it was approximately in the same area, but we don't know precisely as to whether it was a change in any direction. Is that fair?
That's fair and accurate. That's something that, since we were retained to work on this project, we've been trying to verify, but just don't have any, public records to support or to provide that information.
Okay. Now we're talking about a demapping of the a portion of the street here. There's another option available as well, which would be a revocable consent. Is that correct? Now tell us about why, tell us about the pros and cons of pursuing this route over a revocable consent and what that conversation has looked like with the city to date.
Sure. So, I think the applicant was initially presented by the Department of Transportation with the potential to, essentially resolve this issue through the revocable consent approach. The concern that the applicant has had and continues to have is that in contrast to the demapping, the revocable consent is it has to be renewed on a yearly basis. It doesn't provide the same type of permanency that a city map change would ultimately have. And where that comes into play and creates an issue for the applicant as a homeowner within New York City, there is concern that financial institutions, title companies, they have, in our experience and the applicant's experience, they have difficulties understanding the lack of permanency with a revocable consent. It's right there in the name. It's something that in these agreements the city maintains really a clear right to revoke that permission or that license to use city land at any time, and then again requires the time and resources to renew those agreements on a yearly basis. So this presents an issue for a homeowner with respect to anything to do with financing or title insurance. He's not planning to, but were he to try and sell the home, this is essentially a cloud on title, the encroachment. So the goal here with the demapping is to create permanency. And I'll wrap up by saying that this would create some revenue for the city in terms of this is subject to the demapping's potential approval. The applicant would be required to purchase the demapped property at a price that's determined by the city after an appraisal, and also enter into a mapping agreement. This slide that's still up illustrates one of the requirements that the DOT has asked the applicant to undertake with respect to a mapping agreement, which is essentially improve the street to DOT satisfaction, essentially straightening out that jog. So there is some benefit to the city in terms of the revenue that would be created both in the initial purchase of the DMAP portion of the street, as well as presumably an increased tax revenue from a larger private property, as well as the improvements that would be made to the curb condition along 43rd Avenue.
Thank you. On the subject of that curb condition, so as part of the mapping agreement, it sounds like DOT wants you to straighten that out and to have a direct curb along the dotted red line as indicated in this slide. Is that accurate?
That's correct. This is actually this graphic was provided by the Department of Transportation to illustrate the ask, and or not an ask, the ultimate requirement that would be placed on the mapping agreement.
And we certainly would have an interest in making sure that there is a certain minimum width of the sidewalk here for the public to be able to enjoy an experience in walking by this wall and the corrected curb condition. What do you believe is the appropriate amount of space that should be created as a minimum here between the wall and the curb?
So I'll note that although it's not visible on this graphic, at the western edge of the demapping area, the width of the sidewalk is 5 feet 2 inches. And if you cross 222nd Street, I guess on the left-hand side of the screen, it's not visible. The sidewalks in the area are 5 feet 2 inches. The actual paved sidewalk portion. I spoke with the applicant. And there is an agreement that, if the city were to require that the sidewalks be widened to ensure, adequate and appropriate pedestrian experience along 43rd Street, that's something that we would work with DOT to ensure. The sidewalk on the eastern portion of the site, abutting the adjacent property, those sidewalk widths are less. They're about 4 feet 6 inches. So we'd certainly agree to consider creating a consistent sidewalk width of 5 feet 2 inches. Obviously, if there's discussion or request from DOT or the City Planning Commission to increase the width, beyond 5 feet 2 inches, we're happy to consider that as well.
Okay, and last question from me before I go to my colleagues here is, community board disapproved, and I don't want to speak paraphrase for them, but I think the flavor of the disapproval was this would be rewarding an illegal condition here, and that the city should not do that. Can you address that sentiment?
Yes, I think that's a fair characterization of what we heard from the community board. I would note, just as a point of comparison, this is not an adverse possession case where a bad actor, establishes or an encroachment and then is rewarded by, obtaining that property. The applicant here is ultimately, if this demapping were approved, required to pay fair market value as determined by the city for this property. This is coming at great cost to the applicant. He certainly doesn't see it as a reward. He sees it as an approach that would allow him to start to resolve the 4 open violations and ultimately obtain the certificate of occupancy for his property. So, that's really our response. We understand that the community board was upset, and we're happy to continue working with them. I think that from the applicant's perspective, ultimately this approach is a means to ultimately resolving the underlying violations and obtaining a CO and having an actual ability to work on this encroached property, through legal means, by obtaining permits from the Department of Buildings, et cetera. So we understand the community board sentiment, but really believe that this is the best way to address the ultimate concerns for both the applicant and the community.
Thank you. Let me go to Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you have any information for us on the possibility, which I understand the community board was quite upset about, that 43rd would become a one-way street, that DOT would turn it into a one-way street because of its width and other characteristics? Do you have any further information for us on those discussions?
I do not. I know that the community board indicated that they would be contacting the Department of Transportation directly to voice those concerns about any changes to the how vehicles travel along this portion of 43rd Avenue. We certainly, myself and the applicant, have not heard that from the Department of Transportation. We've only discussed the area of the city street outside of the travel lanes, and understand, that the only change that the DOT would ask for is that straightening of the jog is still illustrated on the slide that's on the screen. So that's a long way of saying we're not aware of any contemplated change to vehicular traffic on 43rd Avenue. I can certainly, raise this question with DOT and report back, but have not heard anything thus far.
Okay, and I just wanted to say also that revocable consents are not merely for a year. They can be for much longer, and they have been issued for longer periods of time.
Thank you. I was not aware of that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no other questions other than Commissioner Osorio, we will go to Commissioner Osorio, and then we'll see if there's anybody else.
Thank you. Just really a quick question. Building on the chair's question, I just wanted to know, what do you think about and understanding your position in terms of the community board's concerns, what do you think about what the borough president is suggesting in terms of coming up with a plan where you can have constant check-ins with the community board to, recognize, acknowledge their concerns, but come up with a mutually agreed process here?
We're happy to have, good faith check-ins with the community board. We found that the short answer is yes. That would certainly be something we'd be happy to do. There is a language barrier with respect to the applicant, so my office would need to be involved in those conversations. We'll continue to be in touch with the Queensborough president as this project moves forward. To answer your question, I think that makes sense, and I think given that the community expressed, I guess, sort of the underlying concern wasn't so much quality of life; it was concern over the existence of the wall itself. So, in the interest of not rambling, we generally agree in concept and would need to work out the details of how we do that as a practical matter. But yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, now I see no other questions. My apologies. Okay, let us move on. Thank you very much, Mr. St. Jacques, for your presentation and for answering our questions here. We have one member of the public wishing to testify on this item. It is Henry Euler. And Mr. Euler, when you are ready, we will look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. My name is Henry Euler, and I'm a resident of Bayside. I'm testifying as a resident. I'm also a member of Queens Community Board 11. I've been on the board for 18 years, and this is one of the strangest cases that we've had come before the board. I'm also a civic leader. I represent an area in Western Bayside and Auburndale as well. This came to the board, and we had a committee meeting, and then we had the full board meeting, and I went to the site. I wanted to look at the site myself to see what it was all about. There's a resident that lives in the area. He's on the community board, and his name is George Nahalsis, and he told us at these various committee meetings that this wall was quite a problem for the community. As it was built, there was a lot of debris and construction stuff left out for periods of time. There was also a question about the integrity of the wall. Somebody at the board went to look at it and said there's no holes through the wall to allow water to escape, runoff water. And he said that didn't seem right. There's also the question about 43rd Avenue at that particular location. It is a bottleneck right there. Now, cars park on both sides of the avenue on the as it goes through, and there's one lane going east and one lane going west of traffic. But at that particular point, the two lanes cannot proceed at the same time. One lane has to wait while the other lane proceeds either eastbound or westbound. So it's a problem there. And we were concerned at the community board about how that would be affected in the future if the DOT decides to widen the road or to change the way the road goes in some way. Now that 43rd Avenue is one block north of Northern Boulevard. It's used quite frequently by people trying to divert away from traffic and so forth. there's one way that was not mentioned that this could be remediated, and that's for the owner to move his wall back to his property line. And I think that from what I heard at the community board, people just couldn't understand why that wasn't the simplest way to go about doing it. And I think that may be one of the reasons they voted unanimously against this application. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Euler. We appreciate your taking the time to be with us. Let me see if there are questions for you. All right. I see none. Mr. Euler, thank you very much for being here and for offering your thoughts on this application, calendar number 18. And I do not see any other members of the public wishing to testify in favor or against this application. So we will close the hearing on calendar 18, which is the 43rd Avenue demapping, and we will go back to the part of our agenda that we usually start with, and we will finish up our work for the day. Madam Secretary, if you would do the honors.
Reports on page 7. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 9, 180 East 125th Street, Fresh 2. CD 11 N230071ZAM, and the matter of an application for the grant of an authorization concerning 180 East 125th Street, Fresh 2. For the adoption on calendar number 9, Chair Grodnick.
Aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes, in voting for this item, which I intend to do, I do hope, however, that the applicant will reconsider the amount of space that's being allotted for the fresh supermarket space. This replaces a supermarket that, when it was established approximately 30 years ago, was an event in East Harlem because of the lack of choices. And notwithstanding the fact that there is a new supermarket in close proximity to this site, the need for choices still persists in Community Board 11. And I would hope that beyond meeting the specifications for a fresh designation in this instance, that the applicant would reconsider expanding what is an ample footprint along 125th Street to create a bigger supermarket space. With that, I vote aye.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Echoing the comments of the Vice Chair, the concerns of the Vice Chair, I vote no.
Commissioner Bozark.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Kroll.
Yes.
Commissioner Dewick.
I'd like to associate myself with the comments of the Vice Chair, and I vote yes.
Commissioner Gold.
I'd also echo similar comments and vote yes.
Commissioner Goodrich. Yes. Commissioner Kermani.
Also associating myself with the comments of the Vice Chair, yes.
Commissioner Marin.
I also concur with the comments made by the Vice Chair and agreed by the rest of my commissioners on this body. I will also opine that I think that it is time for us to reevaluate the FRESH program and what the consideration is that's given providing the fresh market, because here, as you know, we have a market that went from 30,000 square feet to 6,000 square feet, and we have a 20,000 square foot floor plate where this developer is now adding one story to his building. And if this were a 6,000 square foot floor plate and a developer had a 6,000 square foot market, they'd still only get one floor for 6,000 square feet. So I think it's time for us to take a look at the market and look at the fresh program and see how those considerations are made and reevaluate that. But with that, I understand the need for affordable housing. I also will posit that I think that in this site, I would have preferred to see an application for height. That's my only opinion. So with that, I vote yes.
Commissioner Osorio.
I concur with the previous comments, but I agree with Commissioner Benjamin. I vote no.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
I also concur with the comments raised by Vice Chair Knuckles and Commissioner Marin, and I vote yes.
Calendar 9 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar numbers 10, 11, 12, and 13. CD2, 55 Arbor Court. Calendar number 10, N230163ZAR. Calendar number 11, N230164ZAR. 93 Cromwell Circle. Calendar number 12, N230095ZAR. Calendar number 13, N230096ZAR. And the matter of applications for the grant of authorizations concerning 55 Arbor Court and 93 Cromwell Circle. For the adoption on calendar numbers 10, 11, 12, and 13, Chair Grodnick.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozark.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Crowell.
Yes.
Commissioner Duick.
Yes.
Commissioner Gold.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich. Commissioner Kamani.
Yep.
Commissioner Mudden.
Yes.
Commissioner Osorio.
Yes.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Yes.
Calendar numbers 10, 11, 12, and 13 have been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 14, 57 Elder Avenue, CD3 N 220419 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of certification concerning 57 Elder Avenue. For the adoption on calendar number 14, Chair Grodnick.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozark.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo. Commissioner Crowell. Commissioner Duick.
Yes.
Commissioner Gold.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich. Commissioner Kamani.
Yes.
Commissioner Mudden.
Yes.
Commissioner Osorio.
Yes.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Yes. Yes.
Calendar number 14 has been adopted.
Great. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, I appreciate your switching the agenda around a little bit today. Is there any other business before the commission?
No, Chair Grodnick, there is no other business before the commission, but I do have some public information to share. For those of you who are unable to or did not wish to testify, you can submit written testimony online by selecting this hearing on the upcoming meetings page of the NYC Engage portal, through DCP's website, or by mailing your comments to City Planning Commission, Calendar Information Office, 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, 10271.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And with that, my thanks to the commission and to everybody who was here with us to testify today. The time is now 11:19, and we are adjourned.